Of a Linear Circle, Part 1, Chapter 7, Detrimental. Nazar takes another brief look around his office before he goes back out into the classroom, opens the main door, and props it open. He is immediately assailed by three different house elves. Hello? There is the Master Slytherin, one of them gasps, and flops over in relief. We as being looking for you everywhere, another says, panting. I've been here for perhaps an hour at most, Nazar says, baffled. You has never seen the bloody bat in a mood, the third declares. Yes, actually I have. It's entertaining. Go tell him where I am, please. I'm leaving the door open this time. One of the elves disappears, leaving Nazar with two. This is going to be the new defense classroom. Could you perhaps find at least the bare minimum of furniture for it? The second elf vanishes, leaving him with one. All right, now, what is it? The elf peers up at him with bulbous green eyes. You has missed dinner. I've actually missed a lot, Nazar counters. You're not going to leave until I accept dinner, are you? Matron Poppy is scarier than a bloody bat, the elf says. Healers often are terrifying, Nazar smiles. Dinner is fine, but please keep it light. By human terms, thank you, not house elf terms. The elf looks miffed at being caught before it can try to bury Nazar in a six-course meal before he disappears. By the time he's tracked down by Severus, he has a desk, a chair, and probably inhaled dinner at a pace that alarmed the house elves, given that the dinner tray was removed and a tea tray left in its place. He's 3 pages into the book and almost feels like he remembers one of his own fucking specialties. I take it you found your classroom on the 7th floor, where a door has never existed before. Nazar glances up at Severus. And I have no idea who to blame for hiding it either. Come in. I did something smart. You vanished at the beginning of dinner, Severus replies dryly. I literally vanished, Nazar corrects him cheerfully. Useful charm. Much better than that pathetic disillusionment bit that's in those fucking stupid textbooks you showed me earlier. Severus doesn't seem to know how to respond to that. Leaving aside your disappearance, what did you do that was intelligent? Nazar holds up the book. Updating duplication spell. I can read one of every 4 books in my office. That means I can probably bring Kumbrick back from the dead if I reverse translate it correctly. Speaking of which, want to learn to become a metamorph magus. Severus holds up one hand. Please restrain yourself to 1 intriguing revelation per minute. No, I do not wish to become a metamorph magus. Transfiguration is not my specialty unless I am causing it with potions ingredients. You got O's in transfiguration, you liar, Nazar mutters. He turns the page before glancing down at his fingers, concentrating. His nails sharpen to points before he lets the magic go again. Ha! Salazar, you're an idiot. I'm going to find a spare painting of him to hang in here. I reserve the right to say it to him at least once a day. Severus seems resigned. Not in front of students. Why not, Severus? They're fucking terrified of me. Nazar puts the book down so he can glare at the idiot head of his brother's house. And for no reason at all other than the truth of my family name. Perhaps it would do the lot of them some good to come to regard Salazar as a human being instead of a terrifying myth. I have no idea where the terrifying bit came from either. Godric was the one who broke things if he had 3 goblets too many of wine. I have always said that Gryffindors were an ill-mannered, chaotic bunch of cretins, Severus says. No, you just had too many run-ins with 3 Gryffindors who decided it was an excellent idea. You do seem to like to conveniently forget that your best friend was also one of your favorite annoying and useless Gryffindors. If anyone else said that to me, I would hex them into atoms, Severus hisses. Nazar smiles. I'm aware. Go ahead and try. Your wand will not thank you for it. Severus leans back. Is that a terrible joke or a terrible threat? It could always be both. But no, it's the truth of this castle's magic. You're not properly tied into it, and I am. Thus, if you raise a wand against me, Hogwarts is going to obliterate your wand. And if you're really lucky, she won't take your hand with it. Nazar frowns. Come to think of it, your headmaster isn't properly tied in either. I know I've forgotten quite a bit, but no one else has the excuse of being a damned portrait for 9 centuries. People write these things down for a reason. A few minutes of silence followed that declaration. Nazar is drawn right back into the book. It's reminding him of quite a bit, and he hopes the rest of his library is this useful. Then Severus finally ventures, "This tying in. Can you tell me more?" Nazar closes the book. "You're the head of Slytherin House. You should be tied into the school in such a way that you know what's going on within the house's confines at all times, for given levels of propriety, and not needing to know literally everything," Nazar says. "Say Draco was stupid enough to punch Theodore again in the common room. You would know. If Draco were stupid enough to do something intimate with Theodore in the common room, you would not know. And believe me, it took a while to work out those details, so that none of us interrupted things we never wanted to witness in the first place. The headmaster should have that awareness of the rest of the school and grounds. Dumbledore has part of it. I could tell he heard what I did earlier this morning. He doesn't hear it to the same extent, though, else he would have known the first time he stepped foot in that classroom after Riddle left that something was not as it should be." That sounds as if it would be exceptionally useful. It is. Nazar feels the bottom drop out of his stomach. It was. Nazar? Nazar looks at Severus. "Do you recall what I once told you? That we had non-magical workers in the castle before there was an incident in which one harmed a student. You said it caused their death, if I remember correctly," Severus replies. "It wasn't a single student. 2 girls. 2 best friends." Nazar feels his nails bite in his palms and uncurls his hands. At least he hadn't left his nails pointed, or he would be bleeding right now. "I began teaching in this school when I was 17. I earned my title because I'm the one who found him. He bashed one over the head and told the other to behave and they wouldn't be harmed. She was 10 years old and terrified. She believed him. He'd killed her and moved on to his second victim before I got there. There was not much left of him afterwards." "I see." "Fortunately, no. You didn't see the aftermath of that, and neither did she. I'm still older than you by 7 years, or by 985 years, whichever you prefer. So I'd like it to be a few more days before the shine wears off and reveals the tarnish beneath, thank you." Nazar responds, "When Aethelred of York came to Hogwarts to claim justice for his son's death, I delivered his son's remains to him personally in a chamber pot, used a visual memory charm to reveal what his son had done, and asked if he was still brave enough to demand justice. Aethelred was wise enough to say no. He was not wise enough to say yes when I said that he owed the girl justice for what his offspring had done." Nazar lets out a brief, humorless laugh. "So much for that bloodline. Not that there were any of them left at that point aside from those 2. They'd gotten into some very bad habits. The Black family everyone is in such terror of is fairly tame in comparison." "A non-magical son with a wizarding parent?" Severus asks. "It was more accepted back then that not everyone was magical, and you weren't going to be ejected from a family for being one sort while everyone else was the other. So yes, technically, I defeated my first dark magician at age 17. Salazar was so annoyed. I beat out his previous accomplishment by an entire year. I told him that at least I wasn't banned from the entire kingdom of Leon, but for a single week per year, for killing off an evil magical prince. Salazar was enough of a prick to point out that I just offed a magical duke, and York would not be welcoming me back any time soon." Nazar glances up just in time to see Severus fighting a smile. "It's not against the law to be happy about something." "Consider it practice," Severus says. "If I can keep this dour mask in place when you are being genuinely entertaining, then I can also do it when it might be necessary to remain alive." Nazar scowls. "I can't decide if I'm thrilled that you find me entertaining, or if I want to beat you to death with this book for being so bloody defeatist." "I consider it being realistic," Severus counters. "No, it's called stupidity," Nazar replies. "A wise man plans on how to survive, not on how to die with the least amount of fuss." "Is that what you think I'm doing, choosing the fastest path towards death?" Severus asks. "Yes," Nazar shouts incensed. "I've been watching you choose it since you were 15, you great bleeding idiot. Fortunately, for us both, you are quite bad at ending up dead." Ah, Severus is very good at remaining implacable in the face of someone else's temper. Perhaps I still need to practice more. Nazar grinds his teeth before he slams his wand down onto the desk. Yes, you should. Right now. Severus's eyes widen. Excuse me? You want more practice. I want you significantly less dead. This is a defense classroom by specific design. Let's find out how likely we are to get our respective wishes. Severus crosses his arms. You just warned me what would happen if I raised a wand against you. At least you're already listening. That's a good start. Nazar gestures with his wand to slam the door shut. This is now a place of learning. You can raise your wand against me all you like, he says, standing up and kicking aside 3 of the new chairs to clear out an available space. Do hurry up, or this will take all night. The innuendo is not actually helpful, Severus mutters as he gets to his feet. I have no wish to hurt you. You don't even know if it's possible. You said I can raise a wand against you. What is to actually stop either of us from hurting each other? Severus asks after he takes his wand from his sleeve. Hurt? Oh, I didn't say it wouldn't hurt, Nazar grins. The killing curse will not kill anyone in this room, no matter the strength used to cast it. But you'll certainly know that it has struck you. A hex or a jinx that might cause fatal damage will be repelled by the protective magic in the room, though you most certainly know that had it been in real life, you would be very, very dead. A spell that would cause permanent damage will behave similarly. You may literally do your absolute worst, and I might have to knit a few bones. Maybe. Nazar lifts his wand. Prove me right. Severus does not disappoint him. Nazar is glad to see the man refusing to hold back. But holy gods, Nazar has to learn that severing spell. That poor chair will never be the same, no matter what repairing charms are used on it. Severus's form is fluid, non-verbal, and definitely the wand work of a man used to destroying things on a regular basis. When the hell did you have a chance to practice this? 1981 was quite a while ago, Nazar observes, smiling over the point of his wand as they keep circling the room. I didn't, Severus replies. I hope they deserved what they got, Nazar says in response to that blatant lie, and ducks a blasting hex that would have left him with one hell of a migraine. Temper, Nazar says, and turns the floor beneath Severus's feet to ice. Someone has not been teaching weather charms properly. Severus actually slides and falls before he performs a wandless spell that flings a chair at Nazar. He lifts his arm and catches the hardwood on a weak Protego shield, cast too late to do much good. Better! I just broke your bloody arm. Good, Nazar yells back. It only took you a fucking half hour to manage something detrimental. You're a lunatic. Nazar gives it another 10 minutes before he has to give up because his head is spinning. I'll yield. Just stop throwing chairs at me. It's called survival, Severus retorts, but he's lowering his wand. Excellent. Nazar slides down the wall until he's seated on the floor. That's a lot better than lying down beneath a rail train in dainty repose. Severus snorts out a laugh and joins him. Your arm is still broken. You're bleeding, Nazar notes, resting his left arm against his chest. That was fun. Severus looks at him from the corner of his eye. I see. You were Hogwarts' first formal instructor of defense because you're insane. Insane people are imaginative. Imaginative use of your circumstances means you live to fight another day. Severus makes a faint sound of agreement. I don't think this is what Poppy had in mind when she said you should ease your way back into using magic. Nazar regards the partially destroyed classroom. Oh, well, I probably shouldn't inform her this was easing my way back into things. Healers frown on that. What sort of man are you, Nazar? Severus asks after a minute of silence. You've known me since you were 11 years old, Severus. You know the answer to that question. No. I knew a portrait so desperate for company that he would speak to the lowest of the low in his brother's house. Nazar scowls at Severus. Are you impugning my sense of taste? There were definitely more intriguing options at the time, Severus says. No, there were a number of blighters with an inflated sense of self-importance. Nazar keeps glaring at him. I have enough self-importance for an entire room. I don't need to be friends with people who will attempt to blow smoke up my backside just to inflate that sense of self-worth. Also, stop being stupid. It doesn't suit you at all. It never did. Severus tilts his head in a way that causes his hair to fall forward, hiding his face. January, in 1977. I wish you'd asked me to stay. Nazar tries not to wince. Would you have, if I'd asked? Severus sighs. No, but it would still have been nice to hear the words. Nobody stays behind for the sake of a portrait, Nazar murmurs. You're right, though. I'm sorry. I should have asked you to stay. Come on, I'll make it up to you. Are you going to bribe me? Severus asks, but does follow Nazar into his office. Nazar mends the 2 fractures in his arm along the way, casting the healing spells without a word needed. He's heard what that new fangled Skelegro potion is supposed to be like. No thank you, not ever. I always thought books made excellent bribes. Nazar taps his fingers along his wand for a moment, thinking. No particular title is occurring to him. Arxes potionum factual libro. 4 books bound in green stained leather rock in place. Nazar picks them up, flipping through the languages, Cumbric, Old English, French, then Modern English, before he places the Modern English copy into Severus's hands. The look Severus gives him is the epitome of a suspicious Slytherin. Then he opens it and makes it through 4 pages of text before he halts mid-motion. Nazar. What? If it's a spell for impotency, you don't get to blame me, not my work. At the very least, it's not his handwriting. It looks familiar, but the book is unsigned. No, it isn't that. I got 3 potions into this book before I encountered something I've never heard of before. Severus turns a few more pages, and so are the next 6 potions. Have fun, Nazar offers. I don't actually remember what's in there. If you kill anyone with something in that book, I have no idea where you discovered it. I do like how you assume I'll use something within these pages to kill someone, Severus replies in a dry voice. Nazar rolls his eyes. You're the one who won't stop spying on my idiot great-grandnephew. Speaking of terrible people, how many of our house did Umbridge use that fucking quill on? 4, Severus answers as he closes the book. 2 fifth years and 2 third years. The Ravenclaws ignored her unless she resorted to direct insult, so they only have 2 students. The Gryffindors and the Hufflepuffs were hit hardest. 14 Gryffindors and 8 Hufflepuffs. This is really not making me want her any less dead, Nazar says, walking out of his office and shutting the door once Severus has joined him in the classroom. I do hope Dumbledore isn't expecting me to use that office downstairs. Probably not. Severus tucks the book into his robes before he asks, Did you find your living quarters? Nazar nods. Is it too much to ask to see them? I'm curious as to where a portrait lived before the canvas. That would be fair, wouldn't it? Nazar murmurs. I've seen yours. He clears his throat, but that doesn't stop his eyes from burning. Going into those rooms reminded me of a lot of things I'd forgotten entirely, Severus, and some of it is painful. You'll see them, I promise. Just not tonight, please. Severus watches as Kanza glides out onto Nazar's shoulder. I won't push, but it seems she has an opinion. Do you, dearest? Kanza nods. I made him take me with him for a short time while you slept. He was brewing today. It was pleasing. Nazar smiles. You had a guest, and she got to watch you brew. She likes that, though she was probably irritated that you couldn't understand her suggestions. It's bloody essence of Dittany, Severus replies. It isn't complicated enough to require suggestions of any sort. Did you remember the lemon balm oil? Nazar asks. Severus frowns at him. Why would I add lemon balm oil to essence of Dittany? Nazar grins. No reason. Severus rolls his eyes. If I show you my office, will you inform me as to why you think it's a useful addition? Certainly. Nazar tucks his book into his robe pocket and tries not to bounce on his toes. It isn't that exciting, Severus says dryly. Severus, it's something new, Nazar replies. It really is that exciting. Severus seems to hesitate before nodding. Yes, I suppose it would be. Nazar pauses before he shuts the classroom door behind them. You may disappear all you like, Nazar tells the door sternly, but when I come up here, you will show yourself at once, or we will have words, and those words will involve me removing your useless magical self, even if I have to put a hole in the wall to do it. Severus regards Nazar curiously as the door vanishes when it's shut. Do you threaten everything you encounter? Only when it's useful. Severus's office is in the dungeons, near the entrance to the Slytherin common room, but not close enough to be a hint. The inside is a large open space that still manages to be dark and dim, brightened only by a few scattered torches. It's charming, Nazar says. That is not the first thing most say when confronted by this space. Nazar wanders over to the shelves, his attention caught by all of the stoppered glass bottles. Each is marked by Severus's handwriting, and all but hum with the magic of hundreds of different preservation charms. The floor space is open, but for a long table set up with two different cauldrons and a complicated distillery between them. The other table has a pile of scrolls held in place by a set of stone bookends, a stack of books, and a quill standing in a holder next to a sealed ink pot. I was being honest. I don't recall what this room was used for originally, he smiles. It's very you, Severus. Severus gives him a bewildered look. You don't mean that as an insult. What? Nazar stares at him. Why would I? Unless I'm missing something. No, Severus slowly shakes his head. My preferences are considered undesirable. Fuck someone else's preferences. You're the person who has to work in this room, Nazar says. That means you should like staring at it. Severus turns away and changes the subject. Your brother didn't reside or work in the dungeons? No, don't get me wrong. Salazar loved a good cavern. The family home in Castile was built over fairly extensive Roman catacombs from the 4th or 5th century. But when it came to where he lived or worked, he preferred sunlight. His classroom was on the 3rd floor near the library. He lived nearby at first, but Nazar trails off. I can't remember why, but he moved out of those quarters. He lived on the 4th floor afterwards. Helga Hufflepuff? Helga loved being underground. Nazar peers down into a much-reduced cauldron full of dittany. And it's not Hufflepuff, it's Huglipuff, a combination of Norse, Latin, and Old English. She chose it herself when she rejected her father's name. I can see how that would have been mauled by the passing centuries. Severus selects one of the smaller glass bottles and approaches the table. What does it mean? Quick thought, fierce defense. Nazar smiles. Gods, I must have been so young when she told me that the first time. You aren't certain? I can't remember how old I was, but she was young, Nazar answers. I was 7 years younger than Helga, and she was 22 in 990. Severus eyes him. 22? Salazar was 20, Nazar points out, amused when Severus seems baffled by that. You never once said that I might be too young to be head of house. Severus puts a bottle labeled lemon balm oil onto the table. Pay up. Nazar smiles. Lemon balm oil has two qualities that make it an exceptional boost for essence of dittany. 2. Severus frowns in thought, then he shouts and starts swearing under his breath. Nazar's smile widens. That's very similar to what Salazar said at the time, too. That is because in hindsight, it's fucking obvious, Severus glares at him. You're not allowed to say you are terrible at potions, ever. I am, though. I might have good ideas from time to time, but that's not the same thing as being good at it all the time. Severus doesn't look convinced. This has been reducing for nearly 10 hours and was originally a full cauldron. You can figure out those two qualities. You know how much to add. Breaking the bargain already? Severus asks in a voice that is like smoke. Nazar isn't allowed to make an undignified sound in response. He will not. He also has to put aside some very specific realizations to contend with later. You only bargained for why, not how, Nazar reminds him, glad that he sounds normal. I gave you Helga's true name, told you where my brother used to live and work, and complimented your office. Severus's eyes narrow. Very well. At least tell me if I'm wrong before I add too much. I can't afford to ruin this batch. Only as long as you continue our semi-nightly tradition, Nazar counters. Tradition? Severus asks in genuine confusion. You've spent many nights since 1982 having a nightcap in front of my portrait. Nazar spreads his arms. I'm right here. You owe me so much alcohol, Severus Snape. Severus' expression breaks into a wide smile before he lowers his head, his hair drifting forward to partially mask the expression. Agreed. Nazar watches as Severus gets a glass pipette and allows 5 drops of lemon balm oil to fall into the reduced Dittany. Then Severus puts it aside, head cocked as if to listen. A moment later, he's removing a glass stirring rod and replacing it with a bronze to stir in the oil. Severus pauses again before he removes the stirring rod and places it aside with the glass one. Lemon balm oil changed an inflammatory potion to an anti-inflammatory. Excellent. Severus gives him an accusatory look. You didn't say it would do that. Technically, I didn't remember it would do that, Nazar replies. I think it's a neat side effect. Did I earn a drink? I still have to bottle this, Severus mutters. Nazar estimates the liquid left in the cauldron and glances over at several rows of empty bottles before he points at one. Severus glances at it and nods. Nazar fetches it while Severus sets up the cauldron's contents to go through a sieve to remove the plant matter. When that's done, Nazar looks at Severus again expectantly. Severus rolls his eyes as he puts a stopper in a large bottle full of essence of Dittany. I really hope I don't need all of this in a single school term. And yes, you earned it. Ages ago. Come on. Nazar nods, opens the door, and nearly walks face first into Blaise Zabini. Blaise, what are you doing here? Blaise sighs and holds out his hand, which is wrapped in a white handkerchief stained with blood. To see Professor Snape, sir. Mr. Zabini. Severus peers down at the young man's hand. It won't stop bleeding. Blaise shakes his head. No, sir. I thought maybe you would know what to do about it. I'm running out of handkerchiefs. Blood quill? Nazar asks as Severus curses under his breath. Blaise nods. I know how. You do? Blaise and Severus ask at the same time. Nazar lets out an amused snort. Seriously, yes. And I really need to get into the habit of calling you all by your last names, Mr. Zabini. Go sit in that chair. Severus tilts his head down near Nazar's ear as Blaise takes a seat in a black leather armchair close to Severus's desk. All I've read about the damned quills say that the wound will continue to bleed until the named punishment is completed. She sent him away with it incomplete, and now it and the quill are inaccessible. I wouldn't let anyone put that quill to paper again anyway. Nazar draws his wand. Come on, it might never be high on your list of favorite bits of magic, but I can show you how to make this stop. Nazar kneels down next to Blaise. Take off that handkerchief. When Blaise does so, Nazar takes his wand, holding onto Blaise's fingers as he rests his wand on the back of the young man's hand, just below the letters starting to well up with blood. What the quill does is bury magic in the skin of the hand that holds it. That magic is expunged by writing, but it can also be drawn out. Severus and Blaise both watch in curiosity and fascination, as Nazar traces along Blaise's skin with the tip of his wand, pulling each bit of magic from the individual letters before tossing it aside. It appears as dirty brown vapor in the air before it fades away. Blaise peers down at his hand when Nazar is done, using his handkerchief to wipe away the last of the blood. Wow, sir, that's amazing. That is blood magic, the proper sort, not the torture of a blood quill or other terrible things, Nazar says. And yes, you'll want to keep that in mind for class. Damn straight I will, sir, Blaise says and winces. I should maybe not so swear in front of you now, right? Nazar grins at him as Severus returns with a lemon balm-infused essence of Dittany. Mr. Zabini, as long as you keep it out of the classroom and mind your manners in public, I don't care. Severus uses a syringe-based pipette to treat Blaise's scars. The schedule for repeating this is still the same, he tells Blaise, and will also require an extra day thanks to Umbridge's nonsense. Don't forget. I won't, sir. Blaise stands up and follows Nazar to the door. Good night. Oh, the rumors, Nazar says under his breath. I'm sure they will be entertaining to hear. Severus leads them out of his office before he shuts and locks the door. Nazar pays more attention this time as they walk down the corridor and turn to the final section that leads to Severus's quarters. Wait, we're deep in the dungeons, near the common room. How is a Gryffindor student getting down here so often to open the chamber without being noticed? Severus frowns. The entrance to the chamber isn't down here. It's on the second floor, along a bank of sinks in the girls' bathroom. That isn't the original entrance. Nazar tilts his head at the wall that fronts the corridor. It's right there. Severus lifts both eyebrows. Directly opposite my quarters. Salazar wanted it to be out of the way. Nazar glances at the wall. Open up, he tells it in Parseltongue, and watches in satisfaction as the wall slides open. The revealed tunnel is smooth, glossy stone with an arched ceiling. Want to go for a walk? Severus gives the tunnel a look of distaste. At least it's not being invaded by tree roots. Nazar judges Severus's expression and the way he is clenching one fist. Close now, he says, and the wall slides shut. Maybe another time. I'm not in a hurry to find a basilisk's corpse. I want to see it, Kanza whispers sadly. I want to see Jay laugh. We will, dearest, Nazar reassures her. But you know how Severus feels about tunnels. We'll do it later. Nazar glances over at Severus to relax the moment the wall slid closed. It can't be opened by anyone except a Parselmouth, Severus, and I'm not telling anyone where this is. Severus nods. I appreciate that. I'm not fond of the idea that there is an entrance right here. They get into Severus's quarters without further incident, be it student or newly revealed passage. Nazar's first sip of fire whiskey has him breathing out what feels like actual fire. Oh wow, that's aptly named. It isn't to your preference, Severus observes. He takes another sip, the alcohol burning in his mouth before he swallows it. Do you have to build up a tolerance for this until it no longer feels like you're drinking a bonfire? I like to have something that captures my attention. Nazar snorts out a laugh. Well, it certainly does that. He regards the pale golden liquid. It's been a really odd day. Severus smiles. I will drink to that. Fuck. So will I, Nazar mutters. The moment their glasses clink together, he drains what's left of the fire whiskey and swallows it down. You are meant to savor that, not inhale it, Severus says. I was not lingering over liquid fire, thank you. Nazar turns the empty crystal glass in his hand, watching the play of light through the angled patterns. He loves what the play of light from the torches creates when the light is scattered through the glass. Severus removes his robe, retrieves the ancient potions book from an inner pocket, and sits down on the sofa. I'm so glad it will soon be the weekend. I desperately want to attempt most of these. Unless you've borrowed Miss Granger's time turner, I don't think that's going to be possible in 2 days. Nazar thinks about it, listens to Kanza's hissed encouragement, and gets out his own book. The empty glass goes onto the mantelpiece, since he's not sure where it is meant to reside. Company. Miss Granger returned the time turner to Minerva, who in turn gave it back to the ministry. I would have kept it. That isn't a no, Nazar thinks, and sits down next to Severus. He opens the book to the page he'd left off on earlier and leans over so their shoulders are pressed together. Nazar, that is it a problem? Nazar asks. Severus is tensed up again, and he can feel it. It is not something I am accustomed to. Why? Nazar shrugs without moving. If you were locked in a portrait for nearly 1,000 years, wouldn't you seek out another's company? You're the only person in Hogwarts who isn't disturbed by my presence, and... Damn it, he has well and truly botched this. This is not something Severus wants. Nazar sits up, staring at the fire. People in this century consider touch in an entirely different manner, don't they? I'm not sure I ever really noticed before. Those who sat together in the common room were friends. Nazar draws in a breath and releases it. Then he turns and forces himself to look Severus in the eye. That was very rude of me. I've made you uncomfortable and offended you, and I'm sorry. I never meant to do either. I'm going to show myself out. Severus is staring at him, an unidentifiable expression frozen on his face that still looks far too much like fear. Good night, Nazar bids him, and apparates directly back to his quarters. You didn't tell anyone you could do that, Kanza says. That will be amusing later. Right, of course it will. Nazar drapes his robe over a chair at the table and then sits down on his sofa, which means he's facing the owl's portrait. She's awake and offering the slow blink of the contented night predator. "Father," Galliena calls from behind him. "Aren't you off to bed soon?" Nazar swallows. "I think I fucked something up, and in less than 24 hours, no less. That's a new record." He gets up and wanders back into the storage room, sitting down on top of the trunk before he buries his face in his hands. "Hermanito?" He glances up to find that Salazar has found its way to the portrait frame closest to the wall. It's the youngest portrait of his brother that exists unless one goes to Castile, and Nazar doesn't know if any of those survived the centuries. "Hello, Sal." "You look absolutely wretched, little brother. What's wrong?" Salazar asks. "What did you send me here?" Nazar asks, his throat so tight it hurts to say the words. "This is hell, Sal. I don't belong here. They know it, and so do I." Salazar lets out a laugh. "Nazar, you do belong here. You weathered nearly a millennium to do so. Others will come to realize that you fit within this castle still. Even she welcomes you." Nazar bites his lip and nods. "She does. Holoath doesn't seem as strong as she used to, but I can still speak to her." "I've not heard the old word in a long time. I missed the sound of it," Salazar says. "Maybe I'll carve it on a wall. Sal, I I know one person. Just one. If I've just wrecked my friendship with Severus by pushing too hard, then there is no reason for me to stay here. Little brother, Severus will not break a friendship over what I'm certain is a trivial matter." Nazar wipes at his eyes. "You didn't see the look on his face." "You are upset by many things, and the crest of the wave chose to break over this single matter," Severus says gently. "Say this foolish event comes to pass. Where will you go?" "I'll go find Voldemort and kill him just to get that task out of the way. Then I'll—" Nazar shrugs. "There is an entire planet out there. I'm certain I could find something to do with the rest of my life." Salazar shakes his head. "Nazar, it's all right to grieve for what you've lost." "I don't know how," Nazar bursts out. "I can't remember half of what I'm grieving for." "As Rowena said, give it time." Salazar waits for him to dry his eyes again. "There should still be a scroll in that trunk bearing our family seal. Did you read it?" Nazar shakes his head. "I got as far as the pronunciamento I received from Edinburgh for Bryce's tomb. That was as far as I could go." "I can't blame you for that." Salazar hesitates. "You should rest, little brother." Nazar shakes his head. "I've got an entire office full of books I need to read. I have to be ready to teach a lot of children not to be bloody sheep come Monday morning." "Damn it, damn it, damn it. Damn it!" Severus shouts, glaring at the embers still burning in his fireplace. He hadn't meant for that to happen. He was the one who had blundered. He was the one who had done something wrong, and instead Nazar had turned around and granted Severus the kindest apology he'd ever received in his entire life. Then he disapparated out of Severus's quarters, over which Severus is still nursing a quiet grudge. Nazar hadn't mentioned that being tied into the castle's magic meant the anti-apparition wards were meaningless to him. When he had last touched another human being in a form that wasn't related to dealing with a student. It's disheartening to realize that it was during the First War, after he'd turned spy for the Order. He'd attempted dating among normal men and women, so he could avoid all the concerns of the Wizarding War. He hadn't done well, but he hadn't done poorly either. His best fortune was encountering a man 2 years older than Severus, who had been kind, willing to teach and guide someone who was still fumbling. Severus groans and put his hands over his face. He is beginning to think he might want that sort of intimacy with Nazar, and every time Nazar touches him, Severus freezes as if he's been hexed. The man has hugged him and leaned against him, as a friend would do, and Severus coped with both actions like an imbecile. He is going to have to overcome that reaction, even if Nazar wants nothing more than friendship. It might even be the role he plays interfering, but he can learn to put that aside in private. He's done it before. He's just not used to that either. Severus sleeps on the sofa and awakens to a delivered tea tray at his usual rising time. Accompanying the tea tray is a note from Albus, informing him that lunch will be held in the staff lounge in order to introduce Nazar Slytherin to the rest of the faculty. He showers, gets dressed, and has breakfast in the great hall. The Slytherins are whispering among themselves, and are radiating smug pleasure at what they know is coming. Severus politely ignores it, even if it's not subtle. Severus was not fond of being outnumbered either. He teaches both of his morning classes of third-year Slytherins and Gryffindors, enjoys his NEWT class with his sixth-years, and then tries not to rage in frustration over dealing with first-year Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws. He berates an idiot Ravenclaw for not being wise enough to read the bloody ingredients list properly, cleans up a mess, and sends them scrambling off to lunch. With that done, he leaves the classroom, shutting the door, and proceeds to the lounge on the second floor. Albus is already there, as is Minerva, Septima, Aurora, Phileas, Rubeus, and Barnaby. Are we the only ones who understand the idea of promptness? Severus asks. Some days it truly seems that way, Barnaby says in disgust. Severus eyes him, wondering if Albus is going to be searching for a new music teacher at the end of the school year. The man hasn't professed any sort of enjoyment in the subject matter during the last 3 terms. Most of the others arrive within the next 2 minutes. Eustace stirs himself from the alchemy classroom, which is a surprise, as is Quintinius crawling out of his hole of an office. Even Sybil climbs down from her tower and arrives with pronouncements of doom on her lips. Binns does not put in an appearance, which isn't a surprise at all. Nazar walks in, sees them all sitting and waiting, and halts mid-step. Oh, I actually thought there would be more of you. Hello. Severus clenches one hand into a fist, but otherwise doesn't react. Nazar is clean-shaven and dressed in what appears to be a dark patterned silk tunic over a black linen shirt, belted at the waist with a thin leather black belt and a small pouch resting near his hip. The clothes are archaic, yes, but they are well made and tailored to fit. Instead of looking entirely out of place, Nazar strikes an impressive figure. Nazar also has the blown-out stare of someone who spent an entire night with their face crammed into a book. Quite understandable, Albus says, waving Nazar forward. Nazar Harifelt Slytherin. This is the full faculty of Hogwarts minus our history teacher, who often forgets to attend to such meetings. He then introduces each teacher in turn by name and subject matter. Barnaby Harper teaches music. Minerva McGonagall is our transfiguration instructor. Phileas Flitwick teaches charms. Rubeus Hagrid is our gamekeeper, as well as our teacher for care of magical creatures. Madame Pomfrey you've met already. Aurora Sinstra teaches astronomy. Septima Vector instructs our students in arithmancy. Bathsheba Babbling teaches ancient runes and ancient studies. Sybil Trelawney, you might have noticed, is here for divination. Rolanda Hooch is our flight instructor, as well as our Quidditch referee. Madame Pince is our librarian. Eustace Viridian teaches alchemy, while Quintinius Sterling lectures on ghoul studies. Sasha Willowwood is our art instructor. Cassandra Shafiq teaches magical theory, while Charity Burbage lectures on Muggle studies. Argus Filcheer is the castle's caretaker, and Mrs. Norris is his assistant. Nazar tilts his head and then repeats every name again, facing each professor as he does so. Nice to meet all of you. Severus observes the expression on Nazar's face and knows he's displeased by the named classes, but not why. Likewise, Minerva replies with perfect politeness. The sentiment is returned in a low murmur by perhaps half of the remaining faculty, while the others say nothing at all. Imbeciles. I absolutely love your shirt, even if the cut is ancient, Sasha says in appreciation. Nazar glances down at his tunic. It's old road silk. I wasn't in the mood for robes today, and it's something familiar. You have more? Sasha asks, smiling. Yes, actually. Helga was pushy about making sure we were all properly clothed and not running around in rags, Nazar answers. Perhaps later, though. Sasha nods. Of course. Now then, we have 50 minutes left to have lunch and perhaps to talk, Albus says, and the house elves bring forth the meal. Severus pays just enough attention to his food not to choke on it. He's observing Nazar, who is not eating much of anything. His attention is on the flow of conversation, watching faces and gestures as he tries to familiarize himself with 20 new people. When Nazar finally turns his head and meets Severus's eyes, Severus looks right at him, frowns and mouths. Eat something, dunderhead. The words startle Nazar, who blinks at him a few times before he glances down at his plate. At least he actually begins eating, though. He gets halfway through the meal and just looks confused. Oh, I have to ask, Rolanda says to Nazar. What is it? Unfamiliar food. I've eaten in a lot of different places. Unfamiliar food isn't difficulty, Nazar replies. I'm just wondering why the English dishes I do recognize are so bloody bland. Oh, that, Charity grins. The French discovered an array of new spices some centuries ago. The English, in direct response, turned to a bland palate. Nazar rolls his eyes. Yes, I really can see the southerners of this island doing so just to stick it to the French. Southerners instead of English, Minerva asks. There were more than 2 countries in Britain in my day, Nazar says. It was easier to mention a region of the island. England existed, yes, but Wales was still 3 differing kingdoms. The Danes were driven out, but they weren't done prodding at the eastern coast. In the north, Strathclyde still existed, and Scotland was still a small kingdom called Alba. The remainder of the north was held by Moray, varying Norse Gaelic rulers, and the Orkney earldom. This castle was in Moray, not Alba. Spoken like a natural teacher, Phileas comments. Nazar frowns. No, I just don't know how to shut up. It's not quite the same thing. Are you truly Salazar Slytherin's brother? Aurora asks. Finally, Nazar leans back in his chair. Someone asked. The tension was starting to become irritating. Well, Charity prompts. Are you? Yes, really and truly, Salazar was my brother. I'm 42 years old physically, but I'm really 1,020, and right now I hate existence. Existence isn't so bad, Rubeus says. Nazar sighs. Everyone I knew and loved died centuries ago. How would you feel about it? Think I'd be bawling my eyes out, Rubeus answers after a thoughtful pause. Nazar points at him. That too, but interspersed with books. Severus, I read through the looking glass last night, and that was a terrible, terrible mistake. I cannot wait to find out why, Severus smirks at Nazar. Was it worse than the first one? Less that, and more the bloody theme of the fucking book. 2 worlds on either side of the looking glass. Which one is real and which one is fantasy? Nazar scowls. We could do without the foul language, I think, Cassandra says with a sniff. I'm sorry. I thought I was in a room full of adults, Nazar retorts. But if it offends so much, I'll resort to the words as they were in my day, and you'll not know I'm still saying the exact same thing. Septima smiles. Now that was interesting. I believe I just listened to your speech patterns float through 3 different centuries. Nazar glances at her. More like 4, actually. Minerva leans forward. Perhaps you should tell us about yourself. We're all curious, and we do reserve judgment without casting aspersions on someone for merely being a Slytherin. Severus resists the urge to roll his eyes. There are others at the table who do not feel the same. All right. I taught defense in this school for 25 years, from 992 until 1017, Nazar says. I don't call it defense against the dark arts. You can kill someone with a great number of spells the others would call harmless. I taught my students how to defend themselves on every conceivable level. The better for them not to wander off into the wilds of Europe and die in foolish ways. What did you think of the school's textbooks on the subject? Barnaby asks. Esos libros son basura estúpida inútil, Nazar replies. It's like staring down a curriculum designed to create sheep. No mention of basic healing spells, mind magic, or even bloody ethics. Who the hell stripped ethics out of this school's curriculum? Someone stupid, obviously, Severus says in a dry voice. The students are meant to rely on their heads of house and the ideals of their house to learn ethical behavior, Quintinius says. Nazar gives the man a flat stare. That is truly stupid. Before Severus, I watched 3 successive heads of Slytherin House prove themselves to be completely useless, and look at the results that's gained us. Voldemort and those silly twits who call themselves Death Eaters. I do so how like I do so like how you label some of the most feared individuals in Britain as silly twits, Pomona says wryly. Nazar shakes his head. I knew those idiots when they were children, whether they spoke to me or not. Most of them were either stupid or desperate. The ones who were desperate realized exactly what they'd gotten into. Then they either then escaped or died in the attempt. You sound like you could name them, Albus says quietly. Euphemia Grace, Guinevere Greengrass, Octavian Burke, Regulus Black, Jewel Burke, Martinius Flint, Alice Bainbridge, Katrina Farley, Apollonius Derrick. Nazar waves his hand at Severus. Present company. The silence that follows is almost painful. Except for Severus, all those you named are dead, Minerva says. Nazar smiles at her, though there is too much grief in the expression to label it happy. I am aware. The conversation ceases after that as everyone finishes their meal, or departs to prepare for classes. At least outright suspicion has faded from several faces, replaced by wary curiosity or genuine interest in Nazar Slytherin. Severus catches Nazar's gaze and tilts his head towards the door. Nazar gives him an odd look, but grants him a near imperceptible nod. When Severus gets up to leave, Nazar follows a moment later, but is immediately waylaid by Rubeus. Hi there, Rubeus exclaims, reaching out to clasp Nazar's hand. I'm Rubeus, which you would have caught before, but I thought I'd introduce myself proper. How are you? Nazar stares up at Rubeus. Short, he says in blank amazement. What is in the food in this country? Severus finds an excuse to linger in the room in the form of Minerva, who wants to argue over some of the recent attentions that were not caused by the pink toad. He can keep up a conversation with her while also listening to Nazar and Rubeus. He thinks Minerva might very well be doing the same thing he is. Severus knows Albus is doing so while pretending to listen to Quintinius and Cassandra argue about ghoul pack ethics. Nah, 'tweren't the food that did it for me, Rubeus says to Nazar. I'm half giant. That isn't going to be a problem, is it? Nazar looks confused. Why would it be a problem? Some folks aren't all that happy about it, Rubeus admits. Thought I'd rather get that bit of awkward out of the way first. Half-bloods like you used to be common, Nazar says to Severus' surprise. Are you giving me another reason to hate the 20th century? No, Rubeus protests at once and then hesitates. Well, not on purpose, at any rate. I assume you've no problem with half-goblins, then, Phileas says. No, see, that is where I'm going to stare in disbelief. How? Nazar asks wide-eyed. Goblin culture really frowns on a goblin sullying themselves with a human. They used to execute the offender. Oh, well, the sullying part is still true, Phileas smiles. My mother was persistent. She set her cap, and she wasn't about to give up. My father left his clan to be with her, though the ministry would have prevented the execution bit. Nazar is still staring. Why the hell does the ministry think it has any sort of control over the affairs of the green folk? Phileas shrugs. It makes them feel better to believe it. Bleedin' ministry would be watching us piss if they thought they could get away with it, Eustace grumbles. You should watch out. The ministry will want you to have proper credentials, Slytherin, Charity teases. Nazar starts to frown. What, 25 years of teaching at a time when those stupid credentials didn't exist isn't credential worthy enough? Fortunately, that's not a concern you will have unless you decide to teach elsewhere in the United Kingdom, Albus interrupts, smiling. You were never sacked, so I did not rehire you so much as return you to your original position. Nazar points at Albus. I want back pay for 978 years of hanging on a wall then, he says, and turns to leave. Minerva gives Severus one more stern look that has a smile lurking beneath, before she exits the room, which seems to be the signal for everyone remaining to try and leave at the same time. Severus waits until he knows Nazar is tracking him before he walks down the corridor and finds a side passage that sees little use, especially with most of the students still in the Great Hall. "I wanted to speak with you," he says when Nazar arrives. Nazar glances back over his shoulder before he looks up at Severus. "All right. I wish to apologize." Severus holds up his hand when Nazar opens his mouth. "Please. Last night, I lacked the means to say what happened was not unwelcome. I was being honest when I did say that I wasn't used to it. It has literally been years since I've been in such close proximity to anyone, Nazar." Nazar lowers his head, pressing his lips together before he speaks. "I was very much afraid that I'd pushed too hard. You're the only person I know, Severus." "I truly did not mean to leave you with that impression." Severus shakes his head. "I am so very bad at this, Nazar. I do not make friends easily, and I do not discard them lightly." "I know. You still think of Lily Evans as your friend, even though she's long gone." "I do," Severus replies. "I learned that lesson, Nazar. If you wanted to join me again this evening for reading or conversation, I would welcome your company." Nazar grants him a tired smile. "We sound so damned formal, Severus. I'll be there at 9 o'clock. Did you have anything in mind?" Severus frowns. "I need to read this stupid book now. You've left me bloody curious." "Curiosity is what fucked up Alice in the first place, Severus." When Severus finally ensures the last of his Slytherins are where they should be for the evening, and his prefects are actually doing their jobs, it's 10 minutes past 9. He walks swiftly back to his quarters and finds Nazar leaning against the wall near the door, reading yet another book. "What's that one? More defense tomes?" Severus asks. "No. Oscar Wilde. The Picture of Dorian Gray. I found it in a lost and found bin on the first floor," Nazar says. "It might belong to someone," Severus tells him as he opens the door. Nazar wanders inside while still reading. "I'll put it back when I'm done. I brought the horror, through the looking glass." "I really don't know if I should thank you for that," Severus replies dryly. He has a drink, though Nazar declines a second opportunity to combat fire whiskey. He settles in on the sofa and breathes through the initial flinch when Nazar leans against him. "No, don't get up," he says when Nazar shifts as if to move. "I'll get over it." "I also have no wish to torture you," Nazar says quietly. "It isn't torture," Severus counters. He makes himself focus on the book instead, which works as an excellent distraction. He spends a great deal of time trying to figure out if Alice is literally insane. After the third chapter, Severus realizes he's heard no sounds of rustling paper aside from his own book. He glances down to find that Nazar has fallen asleep, with his head propped against Severus's shoulder. His lips are slightly parted. He is breathing in the manner of someone who is deeply asleep. "I'm trapped," Severus murmurs, shaking his head. It's gratifying to realize that he doesn't mind at all.